everyone. Today we have our webinar on mastering estate planning, how to efficiently incorporate estate planning into your firm's processes. So this webinar is with Trust&Will and Hubly. And so covering this webinar today, we will have Andreas Mazabel, Head of Advisor Sales at Trust&Will. So with over 10 years of experience in private banking, Andreas is now on a mission to help advisors implement estate planning and deliver comprehensive planning. He views estate planning as a huge opportunity for financial advisors to deepen relationships, add value, and implement legacy planning conversations. From Hubly, we have Fred Egler, who is the Senior Product Manager. So Fred has experience in startups like Betterment to large firms like EY, launching hybrid advice and financial planning products. With an affinity for personal finance and advisory firm processes, he is dedicated to enhancing how financial advisory firms deliver a better and more consistent client experience at scale. And we also have Blair Owens, the customer experience lead at Hubly, who will be joining us on the chat. Blair is our Hubly expert, who has the pleasure of working with our customers in the chat to answer their questions. And he will also be in our webinar chat today to also answer some questions. So before we jump in to how to master estate planning, we're going to give our audience a quick overview today of Hubly and Trust&Will. So Fred, would you be able to enlighten our audience on what exactly Hubly is?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tessa. Super excited to kick off this webinar today. Yeah, as Tessa mentioned, my name's Fred. I'm a product manager at Hubly. I'm a CFP professional, so building Hubly is near and dear to my heart because it's helping to solve a pain point that I used to experience as a financial planner all the time. But yes, for those of you who might not be familiar with Hubly, it's a process management system that provides efficiency, documentation, and visibility across your financial advisory firms. Teams typically look to Hubly as a solution to ensure that they deliver on their promises to clients, working together in one integrated system so that nothing slips through the cracks. And basically, that can happen a lot in fast-paced environments. So Hubly really works in tandem with your CRM, pulling in the relevant data you need to launch client service workflows, automate scheduling and other routine processes, and identifying planning opportunities based on segmentation, age milestones, and other important client data. And really kind of the three main benefits of Hubly are just preventing things from slipping through the cracks by providing visibility across your firm, providing a consistent client experience that scales. We've heard from some firms that Hubly has allowed them to service at least 20% more households than they could otherwise support. And then just clarity and efficiency across the firm with features like automated routing, insight dashboards, and templates from in-house experts and trusted partners like Trust&Will. So yeah, we'll jump into a demo about that later on, but right now, I'll kick it over to Andres to talk a little bit more about Trust&Will.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fred. Really excited to be here. If you've never heard about Trust&Will, one, we're not going to be doing a full product demo because that's not what today is about. But we obviously want to give you a little bit of context in terms of what problems we're solving, and I think more importantly, how we work with advisors. If you're on this call and you don't have an estate plan, I want you to think about why. And this is actually one of the big reasons why we actually started Trust&Will. Less than 35% of Americans today have any estate planning in place. So that means when they pass, depending on the state, they could go through probates. It adds a lot of complexity to settling the estates. And I think really at the end of the day, it adds a lot of pain outside of the emotional pain to the family and loved ones. So we started Trust&Will over 5 years ago. We've helped more than 500,000 families and Americans secure their legacy to Trust&Will. And I think what we've really have delivered on is a more modern and approachable way for clients to complete their estate plan. And we're proud that we've now partnered with over 9,000 financial advisors to really help streamline the estate planning process. So the way that we do that, it's through a dashboard. From a compliance perspective, you're not providing legal advice. You essentially have a portal where you can provide education, and we'll talk a little bit more about the challenges later on in the webinar. But we'll talk more about some of the education that we deliver through the dashboard, how advisors can easily send a link to a client that you may see as a fit for, a client that doesn't have a very complicated estate, and or we continue to hear and see how firms are starting to really build out a practice where you're delivering your services in different states and different cities. So, empowering you to have an estate planning option for clients that have simple estates in all 50 states. And the way that we've done that is very much like, in some ways, like TurboTax. We actually get that comparison very common in that it's a very simple approach, but also we empower your clients to make decisions, customize their documents. And what advisors love is the live member support and attorney support that we provide, so that as your clients are going through the process, they can customize, they can chat with us if they have a question, right? So again, it's not you as the advisor being that involved in the process unless you want to. I think many firms want to be able to say, I help in much more than just investment management, right? Financial planning, tax planning, estate planning. And how do you kind of partner and make it easy for you and your firm to implement these services into your practice? We've really modernized, and I want you to think about, potentially a story where a client comes into your office, they have a huge binder with all their estate documents, and you ask them, and this is actually from personal experience, I spent over a decade at JP Morgan, but most folks, once they actually create their documents, they have this huge folder, they have no idea what decisions they made, or they forget, right? So we're making it easy for your clients to be more empowered and proactive in how they think about their estate documents. And then at the very end, they can download documents and or they get them in the mail. Very gratifying. I think really it's all about that peace of mind that we hear most consistently that clients are getting. So that's a quick overview on Trust and Will. And I think with that said, Fred, we're gonna dive into it and chat a little bit more about challenges that we're seeing.
Thank you for that intro. Super helpful. I think, I just want to jump into the next section and really just, given your experience, like you said, in estate planning in your role, the advisors and firms that you talk to, kind of like, what are the challenges that you often see advisory firms, wealth management professionals, people in ops roles? What are those challenges that they face when it comes to estate planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing to note, historically, estate planning has been done through an attorney primarily, right? And this doesn't primarily replace the relationship that you'll have with attorneys. We've actually seen firms that do an excellent job at complementing trust and will with an attorney. And I say that because the challenge has been one, primarily education. That we actually see this even with advisors that say, most of my clients are in that accumulation stage, so they don't need estate planning. Or you might ask someone, I actually just had a conversation with a friend over the weekend who has no idea about estate planning. And yes, I sometimes talk about estate planning on the weekends. But her perspective was, I don't need a trust yet, right? And they actually own a home. So there's a lot of lack of education around, when do you need an estate plan? Why do you need an estate plan? Is estate planning just about death, or is it also about, incapacity? And if you have children, if you have pets, power of attorneys, right? So education is one. I think two is also the ability for a client, and I want you to think potentially about someone that had their first kid, and maybe most of their assets are in a 401k as an example. They may not need a full-on $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 trust because their situation is so simple. So I think the accessibility is a really, really big part of it that we're seeing helping solve that. But I think education and lack of accessibility are, I think, really two of the main challenges that we've seen. And obviously this highlights, option number two, which is something that we really empower advisors in, that education, checklists, articles, regardless of how you communicate with your clients. Is it newsletters, your review meetings, right? We really want to make sure that you have all the information, education to make it easy for your clients to understand the importance of setting up an estate plan, either through us or an attorney. We just want to make sure that your clients are getting an estate plan in place. And I'll note this, this isn't something, don't just take this from us. And I'm sure you might have seen this in other presentations or circulated online, but your clients are asking for more of your help around estate planning. This is a Spectrum 2021 study, and it's called Focus on What Investors Want. And it surveyed clients that work with a financial advisor, and it asked them essentially, you work with an advisor, you very likely hired them, and you had certain expectations of what you're looking to get out of them. And I just want to note 2 out of the top 5 largest gaps are what we're kind of talking about today: wealth transfer advice and estate planning advice. So 96% of clients expected it versus only 24% of them receiving it. And then estate planning advice, and this is really getting documents in place. What happens after I pass? How do those assets get distributed? What is probate if I don't have an estate plan in place? So really that education, this was 93% versus 22% that were actually receiving that. So just want to note that, want you to think about that as how can I, as a firm, as an advisor, be a little bit more proactive about the services that I'm delivering, specifically around these 2 topics. And 3, and this is why we're so excited to partner with Hubly. When I first, started learning more about Hubly, I've really come to understand the challenges that advisors face in so many different tasks. You have the financial planning, the onboarding, the follow-ups, so much. So really excited to dive a little bit deeper into this, but the feedback that we heard and that we've been hearing is, how do I just make it easy for me to plug this in, no steps, have the guidance to be able to really go through the process of completing or getting my clients to start, complete, and review their estate documents in the future.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think you hit on a bunch of points there about estate planning being quite complex, but also people asking for help and wanting that help, and there being a discrepancy between receiving it and expecting it. So I think there's obviously a need here, like you said, to incorporate these estate planning processes into advisory firm practices, provide clients with more education around estate planning. I guess you talked a little bit about it with this last, incorporating estate planning processes into advisory firms, but how can we go from these challenges to incorporating into your firm, into your advisory firm, to mastering estate planning? How do you incorporate estate planning into the processes of your firm?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've really looked at it from a very strategic approach, and we actually have a whole team that's really helping firms do that. So we do that from a, existing clients perspective. And we've learned, I think, as I mentioned, I think we're getting close to about 9,000 advisors I work with. So we're inquiring about when and how do you talk about estate planning with your existing client base? Are these your annual reviews? We've learned that firms have a process. Some firms have a process around, Q3 in October being estate planning awareness month. So this is where they start tracking, does my client have an estate plan? When was the last time it was updated? And you can start tracking that. And from there, building in a process that makes it easier for you to know that and have that information. And then 2, as we talked about, is also how can we make it easier for firms when they're onboarding a new client to make that much easier, to make sure that your clients are getting the information and the education around estate planning, and then really holding your clients accountable. And we don't have a slide for this, but I'm sure you would agree. One of the top 5 reasons why consumers hire a financial advisor is accountability. I think we'll know, and Fred, with your experience, we all know we need to save for retirement and plan for our kids' college. We know that, and have good credit and all that. but we sometimes just need that education and accountability to keep us on track. And I want to show this slide because I want you to think about this. This is a brand new, I think in the last 2 months, it came out from Fidelity. And you're welcome to Google it. It's called Growth Opportunity for Advisors with Young Investors. But it looked at, your book of business and the assets that you manage. About 57% of those assets, it's going to be inherited by 2045. Yes, the next great wealth transfer, I'm sure you've heard about it. But what's really alarming and really a huge opportunity for you is we know that millennials are the largest population today, and they're going to be inheriting a lot of these assets. And the study actually highlighted that only 13% of advisors are connecting with clients' children. So we want to see how can we make sure that advisors and firms are being really proactive about this. Because guess what? Millennials really care about estate planning. We've now done the third largest estate planning millennial study. We released this one in Q2 of this year. And about 25,000 millennials, 78% of them told us that multi-generational wealth is really important to them. So millennials were, I think, really wired to be very proactive in the way that we do things and financial freedom and all that. So I just want to pause here for a second. I really want you to think about this on how millennials are really thinking about estate planning and how important it is to them.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. And the future of your firm. Really want you to think about that. In the same study with Fidelity, it showed that firms with a younger client base are actually growing nearly 10 times faster than their peers. And I believe that in that same study, last year in Q3 at Fidelity, more than 60% of the new accounts opened were folks 18 to 33 years old. So young investors are thinking about this, but we don't want to do it by ourselves. We actually want your help as a financial advisor. Technology is making it really easy, but there's that human element that we really want help with. So, Fred, I'll pause here. Any thoughts or anything that I may be missing here?
No, I mean, I think these are all powerful statistics. I think the idea around this generational wealth transfer has been one that we've heard a lot. And I think the point of that is to just really drive home getting in front of clients that are maybe of a younger generation so that you can start those conversations earlier about things like estate planning and potentially have that transfer of wealth kind of be controlled versus having those funds or having those assets kind of walk out the door when that transfer of wealth does happen. So the more you can connect with this generation, the more you can connect with clients and the kids of your clients through things like estate planning, which are pretty complex, the better off you'll be to potentially have that wealth transfer stay in house essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times we focus as advisors so much on the numbers and the return and keeping up with inflation and all that, which is obviously really important. But again, I think it's really is making sure that in the same study, 60% of folks that were surveyed by Fidelity, they felt a heightened need to engage with a financial advisor, right? We've gone from, really low interest rates last year, and millennials, I think, are always at the, leading edge of, being first-time home buyers to doubling interest rates. And what is that? Like, what's the impact, right? So it's really things like this that empower advisors to really add that value and that peace of mind. And I think really to close it out on the millennial side, I just always have to share this slide because this study came out recently and I love this. And I'll be honest, I was very surprised. In our study, 67% of millennials with net worths under 50,000 already have in their estate planning documents with us a charity of their choice. And I think that's really powerful because one, these aren't like 500,000 or $1 million net worth that we're talking about. This is 50,000. but I want you to think about what is the impact of you starting to ask your clients about their legacy. What does their legacy mean to them? What are charities or whatever, things that are very personal to them, and have them open up to you about that. It's really powerful. So how do you master estate planning? And Fred, I think this is, actually, no, I'll keep going. But any other thoughts on that, Fred, as we transition?
No, I don't think so. I think we got through that, the kind of set the stage and the values there. I think getting into this next part about mastering it and working with Trust and Will and working with Hubly to really do that is definitely exciting to get into. So carry on.
Absolutely. And before we kind of jump into the demo that you'll be doing, it's one, having a process. And again, I talked about, and you know this much better than I do from an advisor perspective, you have a lot on your plate. So building a process and helping us with Hubly's help do that, so that you know when to follow up, when to send the educational piece. If it's an existing client or new clients, how do you document? Do they have estate documents in place? When was the last time those were updated, right? So really having that process in place, I think, is really important. Again, this isn't for me. We've actually learned this, and you've seen this a lot, for example, in Kits's service calendar as well. Is this something that you're doing currently? When do you talk about the tax planning piece? When do you talk about estate planning? We're seeing firms that are really focused on this, and their adoption rates are, much, much higher because there's a process behind this. So again, we're seeing this a lot in Q3. And then, I've talked about this a lot, so excuse me for being repetitive on this, but, know when and how to build in estate planning for new clients. I think this is really important. And look, we hear from advisors that say, I have a new client, I am focused on a lot of other things outside of estate planning, which is fair, totally. But we just want to make sure that you have the resources to know when to follow up or when you actually talk about estate planning with your clients with this. So I think with that said, you're probably intrigued to see what this looks like in terms of, hopefully making it a part of your process and a part of your value add. And two, how Hubly is actually making this really, really easy. So Fred, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass it to you.
Awesome. So yeah, I know, thanks Andres for going through that. Super, super helpful and really setting the stage for how Trust and Will and Hubly are kind of making estate planning easier for firms. I know we worked hard to build out some resources for Trust and Will to put these benefits to use in real life and make estate planning easier across firms. Love to jump in and kind of show you exactly what that looks like here so everyone can follow along. So if you can see my screen here, I'm in Hubly right now. One main benefit I mentioned before is kind of Hubly's curated workflow templates from awesome partners like Trust and Will. These templates can be accessed directly in Hubly and are curated with, relevant and specific content from Trust and Will, as well as Hubly's own workflow experts. So as you can see on my screen, we've added in the Trust and Will templates to this hub. And what you can also see is that basically, Hubly makes it very easy to take clients from prospect to new client to financial plan implementation to kind of plan delivery and implementation, which in this situation would be estate planning, and make that a really straightforward process for you and your firm. So yeah, like in this example here, maybe you finished up a financial plan for a client and you're in that that final plan meeting phase where you've just presented the financial plan. And one of those kind of recommendations includes, setting up an estate plan. Hubly enables you to really take that financial plan from final plan review and into the next step of estate planning. So for example, here, like I said, this is final plan meeting, and this is the Trust and Will estate planning onboarding workflow. I can easily just carry a client over to that workflow and they get right added into that workflow in just one quick drag or one quick click. So for example, in this situation with Betty Sue, she's made it through onboarding, she's made it through new financial plan creation. Now she's into the financial plan implementation phase. And now onto this estate planning workflow. So, clicking on Betty Sue, you can see the trust and will basically workflow in here serves as individual tasks specific to this client, but are curated by Trust and Will and curated by Hubly. You can basically see these are all everything you need to know in a step-by-step process. And they really just serve as like a living, breathing procedures document that enhances visibility across your firm, and make sure that everyone is on the same page and is being accountable for the things that need to get done when it comes to implementing, estate planning documents through Trust and Will. For example, here you can see this first task is email client to onboard with Trust and Will. We've set a reminder so it bubbles up when it needs to. There's actually even an email template associated with this task where you can quickly just send that email off to the client. It's already telling you how to, basically get started with Trust and Will and using a link to actually do that. So it's very straightforward and really gives you the ability to go in here and, understand exactly what you need to do client by client. You can also basically just complete tasks for visibility that gets struck through whenever you complete it. We've got compliance in mind, and there's a timestamp whenever you complete a task as well. And you can see for each one of these tasks, there's even more information that we've created with details related to how to get started and check on the status of Trust and Will in the advisor dashboard, all the way down here to a task that's actually where the client is responsible. If you click edit task details and go into the details, you can see that we've toggled this to be a task that a client is specifically responsible for. So there's a lot of customization you can do in these templates that have been curated by, Trust and Will and Hubly. And I think one other thing too, this last task here where it's save completed estate plan to the client's file. So let's say the client goes through this workflow, they're on the last step here where they've generated documents through Trust and Will. It's super easy as an advisor to go into the advisor dashboard of Trust and Will, download those estate planning documents, and then you can come back into Hubly and basically just attach those. So there's continuity across platforms. And so the client service record is complete within Hubly, where you've completed all these tasks and you've filled out an attachment here as well. The one good thing too about Hubly, I mentioned these are all templates, but you can customize these templates for specific use cases for the client. So for instance, not all your clients are going to want this, but maybe a client wants their estate planning documents to be mailed out, copies of them mailed out to family members. You can create a task that says that, and basically just have that in here as one of the tasks that needs to be done for this specific client. So Hubly gives you that customization for these workflows as well. If you go out and actually want to not just edit workflow templates for this specific client, but edit the Trust and Will kind of starting point that we've created for you, you can X out of this client card and go into what's called this button here where you click edit workflow, and you can basically edit specific tasks associated with this workflow so that essentially whenever a client gets added to this workflow, these changes will reflect in this workflow template. So for example, you can see the first task in here is assigned to an advisor. Whenever a client gets added to this workflow, the advisor associated with that client will be assigned to this task. And then CSA is assigned to all these other tasks, because maybe in this situation, this firm wants the CSA to follow up on progress and status of the estate planning implementation. Every time a client gets added to this workflow, the associated CSA to the client will get added or assigned to those tasks in that client workflow that we just looked at. One other item here that I wanted to show you too is there's also an automation rule set. So automation rules are the way that we kind of keep everything running in the background to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. So in this situation, you can see clients that are labeled active and have estate planning will be added 1 month before their next estate planning review date. So this is really important because automatically clients will get added to this workflow, and you don't really have to, make sure that things are, slipping through the cracks or staying up at night wondering if someone's going to do their estate planning review, because this is all happening in the background for you. Also, you can add, for example, in the second estate planning, post estate plan, Trust and Will workflow here, you can basically add in a client servicing moving forward automation rule. So to make sure that you're constantly, after estate planning documents are in place, reviewing those and say clients will be added 1 year after their estate planning date, to make sure that not only you're covered beforehand whenever you have that first initial financial plan and set up those estate planning documents, but after the fact on a regular basis, maybe every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, you can automatically know clients are going to get added into this workflow template and feel confident that you're reviewing the right materials and the right documentation with your clients, so that on a regular basis, you're providing excellent, client service. So those are just some of the things I really wanted to touch on here. We did also include one other Trust and Will workflow, which basically learns more about how to get started with Trust and Will and how to actually create your advisor dashboard there. So, Hubly works for internal processes too. You could potentially add in your firm in this workflow here and basically click into the client card and helpful resources from Trust and Will about watching a demo video on how to get started, setting up your own unique advisor dashboard on the Trust and Will side, and then basically creating your own unique referral template or referral link to email as well are all in here and basically embedded directly into Hubly. So this is basically a workflow for you to basically learn how to get started with Trust and Will and have your advisors get started with it as well if they're curious about it, and could really just serve as a refresher on a regular basis too as you're working with Trust and Will and Hubly to go through and understand what you need to do on a regular basis so that your clients can access everything they need to access. And so, yeah, with this, it's super easy to get started and deeply embed Trust and Will into the Hubly experience for your team. So I really just wanted to show that because, as we touched on, it's super important to make sure you're getting in front of your clients when it comes to estate planning, but you're also regularly reviewing estate planning documents as well. And with these workflow templates, with these automation rules set up, that's pretty much happening on autopilot when you use these templates with Trust and Will and Hubly. So just wanted to share that. And with that, I guess that kind of concludes the demo portion. I did want to maybe kick it over to Andres to just ask him, how people can potentially get started, with Trust and Will or learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great overview, Fred. And we're honestly really excited about the workflow and the work that we'll be doing with you all together. Schedule a demo with us. I think I can actually plug in the CTA, the link here for you all. But essentially, it's trustandwill.com/advisors. This is where you can actually, get more information on the actual landing page. You can click schedule a demo, meet with our team, and essentially take a look at, your process, your resources for estate planning. And obviously, there's, an opportunity for us to be able to help you out in adding more value. We would love that opportunity if it makes sense to do so.
Awesome. Love that. And yeah, on the Hubly side, if you're a Hubly user and you'd like these workflows added to your hub, just send us a message in the chat. If you're not a Hubly user, we'd love to show you a bit more about the benefits of bringing us into your tech stack. And so feel free to, schedule a call with our team here with a workflow expert by scanning the QR code. And with that, I think we can basically have Blair open it up to Q&A if there's any questions coming in.
Security is very important to our users. So I was just wondering, can their information be trusted and secure with the Trust and Will platform?
Yeah, good question, Blair. Appreciate you asking that. Absolutely. So a couple things to note. We're a SOC 2 Type 2 certified. If you're like, what does that actually mean? It's some of the highest standards in the industry when it comes to security. And then 2, for client privacy, when they're sharing documents with you and sharing statuses, they have to opt in to be able to do that, right? We don't just say, hey, Fred, send me a link, and now Fred has access to everything. They have to proactively do that. So we're always extremely cognizant of privacy, cybersecurity, all that stuff, because we obviously understand, 1, it's really important. And 2, it's also really important information that your clients are uploading on our platform. So highest standards at Trust and Will. We work with some of the largest companies in the industry. Name a few, ARP. And we actually just announced this morning, UBS is actually a brand new partner of ours. So always making sure that that's top of mind for our team when it comes to security and privacy.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and conclude there, and appreciate the time, everyone. And
thanks for having me. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Andres.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.